Yeah, the Muslim Ummah. And each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Chosen as part of the best of mankind, we spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our lives makes us realize that it's just part of Allah's plan. Feeling stronger, we take it in our stride.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to episode number 25. That's already how far we have come, mashallah. Time has passed quite fast, and I'm surprised myself how fast it goes, mashallah. And it's really interesting, all these facts and everything we have seen until now. It's very, 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 very interesting and amazing to see how Islam spread throughout the world. And we have looked into its previous spread from the time of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam up to basically nowadays, up to the recent migration waves within Europe. We have looked into North America. We have even looked into Australia and other parts of the world. Now, we are still in the continent of Europe simply because it will play a big role in the future. It has played a role in the past, and it will play a much bigger role in the future. The spread of Islam there is extremely important. We have spoken about Eastern Europe. We have looked into Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, the German-speaking countries, mainly German-speaking countries, and have seen that Islam also there spreads very quickly. We've seen how many reverts there are already, especially in Germany. We're talking about more than 100 to 150,000 reverts. Again, official numbers are not there. We don't know, of course. So if we move on further to the west, actually, of these countries, we move on to the UK, United Kingdom, Britain, or France, the Benelux countries, which are Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. How do they cope with their Muslim immigrants and with their Muslim reverts? Because, as I said before, everywhere you will find Muslim reverts of the population of Europe, and you will find quite some Belgian, French, especially French actually, and it's known that France and Italy are the countries in Europe which have the biggest revert population. First of all, the UK, Britain. The United Kingdom is a country which has a big number of Muslims who came mainly from the Asian, from the Indian subcontinent. They come from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and that's the main countries of origin. Maybe also Afghanistan, of course, and Pakistan. Now, but we will find in places like London, I mean the capital, of course, London is known for being the multi-ethnic and multicultural, multi-religious center of Europe, if not even one of the multicultural centers in the world. You will be able to eat in any restaurant you want in London. You will be able to eat any type of food you want. You will be able to visit any place of worship you like to. You will be able to meet any kind of person and speak any kind of language. MashaAllah, this makes it very special, I think. Living in London is a very special kind of experience. For the Muslims, you can also say, especially London, is a place where you can find any type of Muslims. But the majority, indeed, come from Asia, come from the Indian subcontinent. A big number of Arabs, also Gulf Arabs, from countries like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, the Emirates. They have bought houses in the UK and the United Kingdom, and are residing in places like in Edgware Road, for example, in London, and in many other places. They also like Scotland very much. Now, this all being so attractive to the Muslims, London and the UK has become a place that has attracted a lot of Muslims. Islam has been present in that country, in the United Kingdom, since its formation in 1707. It was not legally recognized until the Trinitarian Act in 1812, And today, it is the second largest religion in the country, with estimates suggesting that by 2010, that we just passed, this is an older information that I have here, the total Muslim population had reached 2.869 million. That was 2010. Last information I got is we have reached the 3 million. We're talking about 2.9 million to 3 million people of the Muslim faith. From really any parts of the world, especially in London, mainly from the Indian subcontinent, as we have mentioned already. There are claims for the first mosque in England basically being the Shah Jahan Mosque, built as a standalone mosque in Woking, not far from London, in 1889. And another mosque which played an important role in the 19th century, established by Abdullah Quilliam William. Abdullah Quilliam was a revert already in the 19th century. And this is amazing, I find, for a country like the UK, which still had colonies at that time. Britain had colonies at that time. And Abdullah was a lawyer, and he accepted Islam in the 19th century and was the one who established a Muslim house of prayer, worship, and quite a big Muslim community of mainly British reverts in Liverpool, mashallah. The differences in practice, I mean, obviously, seeing that we have different types of Muslims in the country, and especially in London, we also have differences in practice. We have Shia, we have Sunni, there's Deobandi, there's Brelwi, there's Sufi, there's any kind of direction of the Muslim faith, and this, of course, brings a diversity with it. The population, as we said, nearly 3 million, this gives us a percentage of 4 to 5%. The Association of British Muslims claims to be the oldest organization of British Muslims, created in 1889 as the English Islamic Association by Abdullah Quilliam. We cannot go deeper into it due to time, but it is interesting, whoever wants to find out more about British Islam, that to see that not only was the British Islam within Britain, of course, we should not forget the biggest empire in the world was the British Empire. The British Empire, the crown colony, was India. The British Empire was all over the world in every continent. So basically, you will be able to find, or that in the 19th century, there were Muslims living in the British Empire, and we're talking about millions of them. It was reported in 2011 that there were around 100,000 reverts to Islam, with 66% of them being women, nearly 70% women. Again, not a rarity we have seen. This is mainly the case. Ireland, UK's neighbor, Britain's neighbor, Ireland, is a little bit different simply because its history, of course, did not permit to have contact to the Muslim world, because Ireland did not have any colonies, but Ireland has attracted a lot of Muslim students, especially from the Arab world, but also from Asia, India, etc., who went to Dublin or to other places where there are universities, smaller places, and established also places of worship in Ireland without any big difficulties. In 1983, the present building of the Dublin Mosque and Islamic Center was bought, renovated, and the headquarters of the society, the Islamic Society, moved from Harrington Street to South Circular Road in Dublin. So Dublin has an Islamic center, in contrast to other countries where there are more Muslims and there is no Islamic center, like Athens, for example, the capital of Greece. Athens alone has more than 500,000 Muslims, but there is no official Islamic center, no official mosque, whereas Dublin has a very tiny minority, not even 1% of Muslims, but they do have an Islamic center. And this is significant to see. This is something that plays a role within the Muslim societies in Europe, within the Muslim communities, because we see how different actually they are and how many problems they have and how different sometimes the problems might be. Although there is poverty that plays a role, although we've seen that many of the Muslims living in Europe are basically low-class working people, we also discover nowadays that in places like in Britain, or even in France and Germany, you will find in certain positions also Muslims who are either wealthier or who have a better position within society. So things are changing slowly but surely. And this makes it very different to the US, as we said before. In the United States, you will see mainly Muslims playing an important role within US society, within American society, North American society, and being in the top of society, being lawyers, being academics, being university lecturers, etc., etc. This in Europe is changing slowly but surely, again, as we said. In certain countries more, in other countries maybe less. But UK, Ireland, Britain, in general, the British Isles, are one of these cases where you can clearly see that indeed these things are changing. The Muslims get a better role in society, a stronger position, and have fought enough for their rights already in the 70s, basically, with regards to halal food at schools, with regards to being accepted as part of society. They had to fight their way through. We have reached nowadays, I would say, a quite good position for the Muslims in British and even Irish societies. France, on the other hand, is different. Seeing that France is one of the three biggest economies in Europe and one of the three biggest countries within the European Union, we'll see that France is of importance, but not only because of its status and the role that it plays within Europe, but also because of its historical past. France used to have most of the Muslim countries under its control, especially Africa. The continent of Africa used to be part of the French Empire, and this for a very long time, and until nowadays we can see the results of being part of the French Empire nowadays. But we will talk about this one after the break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back after the break. We started talking about France. France has played and will play an important role for the Muslims in the world, simply because it's the only Western country which the population of Muslims is 10%. Nearly, at least 9 to 10%, mashallah. This is an incredible amount. In certain areas of Paris, Marseille, Lyon, or Nice, the biggest cities of France, you will even find an unimaginably high percentage of Muslims, where on Fridays, for example, Jumu'ah prayer, you will not be able, the shops are closed, people will not be able to walk on the streets because they are full of worshippers. Because still a lot of mosques are needed in France, seeing the massive population of Muslims in that country. But we should not forget that France is also, next to it being the second biggest empire in the world, having been after the British Empire, of course, the French Empire was the second biggest in the world, it was also the one that had a lot of Muslim subjects under it, especially in Africa. The French claimed Africa for themselves and actually have been claiming ever since until nowadays. We have seen the recent intervention in Mali, and that reminded us again, of course, should have reminded us at least, of the French still wanting Africa, considering that Africa is their backyard. They have an interest in Africa, have ever had an interest in Africa, and are trying also with that to influence policy in Africa. What makes France being a difficult country actually to deal with as Muslims is its ideology. It's secular, it's paranoidally secular policy that is following, and it's quite important to see that it considers itself as indivisible, as a country which is secular, democratic. It has its own social rules. It has its own constitution, which is absolute, has nothing to do with the rest of Europe. It considers its history as the best in the world. it looks at its citizens as having reached the peak of culture and civilization. This, of course, brings arrogance. This, of course, was felt by its non-European subjects, and even nowadays Europeans feel that. They tell you it's not really easy to deal with French people, even if you know French. Now, consider all that, and we now have to deal with a population of 10% within France. These people have to live in a secular environment, a secular country, which doesn't even allow the women to cover as they want to. In Britain, until now, there have been voices, of course, to ban the niqab or to ban even the hijab, simply because of the encouragement that is given by France. But in France, it has happened already. France and Belgium are the countries that have already implemented the niqab prohibition. And this, of course, influences the relationship between the Muslim communities or community within the country and the government. Now, the change of government in France, of course, we are hoping will make things easier. The French nation consists, as we said, out of a lot of Muslims, but not only, because 1 out of 3 people living in France are either born abroad or have somebody who is born abroad, come from a background from abroad, have roots abroad. And this, of course, makes it very, very interesting if you look at the social components of that society. France still has certain parts of the world still belong to France, like there is French Guyana in South America, there is Martinique, Guadeloupe, these are islands in the Caribbean, there are islands in the Pacific Ocean, there are islands in the Indian Ocean that belong to France still. So France still is playing a little bit the role of being an imperial power and does consider, officially at least, everybody under its rule to be a French citizen. But nevertheless, we can clearly see discrimination against non-white citizens, against Muslims, and against other people of different ideologies and faith, as long as it goes, according to the French, against their ideology, of course. More than 5 million of the immigrants in France are of European origin. This is, again, a very big number. Of course, most of them then, of around 4 to 5 million, come from Africa. And that makes France being the country in Europe which has the biggest African population. But not only sub-Saharan Africa, mainly they are of Maghrebi origin, meaning from Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, North Africa. In 2004, a total of 140,000 people immigrated to France. Of them, 90,000 were from Africa and 13,000 from Europe. In 2008, France granted citizenship to 137,000 people, mostly to people from Morocco, Algeria, and Turkey. Another thing again, there is quite a big number of Turkish immigrants in France. Not, of course, like in Germany, we know that, not like in Austria in percentage, of course, but the Turks play a bigger role after the North Africans, if we consider all the North Africans being one group. It is currently estimated that 40% of the French population is descended at least partially from the different waves of immigration the country has received. Between 1921 and 1935, about 1.1 million net immigrants came to France. An amazing amount, isn't it? If you consider that during that time also, a lot of French left for a lot of their colonies, and many of them went to Canada or North America in general. So just imagine. An estimated 1.6 million European Pieds Noirs returned to France as the country's North African possessions gained independence. The Pieds Noirs were basically the French people who came back from North Africa. Consider that Algeria, for example, was seen by the French as French territory, as a settlers' colony, so basically it was part of France. It was even they went even that far to basically settle there, given them nationality, but after the independence, 1.6 million European Pieds-Noirs, mainly French, had to return to France in order, because they couldn't stay there anymore. France is the leading asylum destination in Western Europe with an estimated 50,000 applications in 2005 alone. Now, again, the bigger cities of France are definitely interesting to see because most of them have a vast majority of Muslims living in certain areas, of course. Following France is Belgium, its little cousin, if you want to call it, or brother. Belgium considers itself, although it is divided between Dutch-speaking and French-speaking Belgians, Belgium, especially the capital, Brussels, is following the example of Paris. In many ways, the issue of dealing with Muslims, the way the French deal with the Muslims, there's an equivalent copy of the way that the Belgians deal with them, especially the French-speaking Belgians, and especially in Brussels. Brussels is still, we should not forget, the capital of Europe, of the European Union. So it is important to see what's happening in Brussels in order to understand what is happening within the European Union and what is happening, of course, within the country. So Brussels is not only the capital of Belgium, but also the capital of the entire European Union. And what is played there will have an influence and has an influence in the rest of Europe. Now, Belgium played an important role in the Middle Ages, and it was a center of commerce and culture. From the 16th century on until the Belgian Revolution in 1830, Belgium seceded from the Netherlands. It used to be one part. The Netherlands, Holland, and Belgium used to be together, and that's why we have Dutch-speaking Belgians nowadays. The Muslims living in Belgium have a variety of identity problems. They have to consider themselves, of course, being Muslims first, but then if they belong to the one community in Belgium, the French speakers, for example, then they have to show loyalty to the French-speaking Belgians. If they are from the other side, the Dutch-speaking community, then they have to show loyalty to them. In the end, Belgium is divided as a country itself already, at least between two bigger communities, and there is even a smaller German-speaking community. Now, the immigrants, for the French speakers, the immigrants were very important, are very important, simply because most of them come from Morocco, Algeria, North Africa, as they do in France. Most of them come from North Africa. So they do play an important role in French-speaking Belgium for the French speakers, and they support, of course, the French speakers. Many incidents happened also in Belgium. One of them was the one in December 2011 in Liège, the city of Liège, the killing spree there, which of course affected the way that Belgians looked upon their Muslim citizens in the country. The Netherlands, Holland, is a country which has 1 million Muslims out of 15 million. 15 million inhabitants, 1 million are Muslims, more or less 1 million. Most of them come from two main countries, Turkey and Morocco. Not very diverse, simply because these were the countries that the Dutch turned to sign treaties to accept to work in their factories in the 60s and 70s, Morocco and Turkey. That's the way also Islam is actually divided in Holland. You will find a Turkish type of Islam with the Turkish organizations as we know them from Germany, and a Moroccan type of Islam. And this, of course, does not help for the unity. It does not unify the Muslims. In general, the Muslims are divided in that way, at least the two bigger groups. There are smaller groups from Pakistan, there are smaller groups from other parts of the world, Africa, but Morocco and Turkey are the main big groups. What's important to know about Holland is that it used to be a colonial power as well, and it used to be it used to have Indonesia under its control, which, as we all know, is the biggest Muslim country in the world. Also, we deal with quite some Dutch converts. There is no precise number how many they are, but we can find them throughout the country. What about Scandinavia? The countries in the north of Europe, Sweden, Denmark, Norway. These countries experienced immigration after the Second World War. They were countries of immigration, without a doubt, countries of leaving these countries and going abroad, going to America, Australia, and so on. But they all experienced also Muslim immigrants, and the population is not extremely high. Sweden is the country which has most of them, but Norway and Denmark, of course, despite having xenophobic and Islamophobic elements and feelings, still the percentage of Muslims is not extremely high, but it will still play a role in the future, we suspect, because also the convert element is an important element there. Jazakumullahu khair again. We have to stop here now, unfortunately, and we go on in the next episode, inshallah, and I hope you will join me. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Chosen as part of the best of mankind, we spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our lives makes us realize that it's just part of Allah's plan. Feeling stronger, we take it in our stride. We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Chosen as part of the best of mankind, we spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our life